Blog Talk Radio.
Michiamo apura kanu apura kaiknut neye ojira da medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi Odwirafo. That means greetings to all apura kani apura kaiti people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say for tuning into the show once again, we're going to get started in a second. I'm going to post the links in the chat room from where we are going to be. The documents we'll be dealing with are two publications: the UBEN-HYENG, the Ancestral Names, which is one of our books. We'll be dealing with two sections in that particular text, and then there's an article, SANKOFA Vodou, that we'll deal with also at the end. We're going to put the link for that in the chat room right now. Of course, if anybody has any questions or comments in the chat room, you can, of course, you have to sign in order to make comments or ask questions. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, you have to just hit the number 1 so we can see that your hand is raised. So what we're going to do is we just sent out a couple of messages. I want to make sure that everybody got those messages. And in the meantime, what we're going to build on some of the information that we talked about last night when we were talking about Abode or Ptah, fashioning the world and so forth. We're going to get into some more details. We were talking about Ptah fashioning the bodies of the Abosom, of the divinities, based on the dictates of the Supreme Being, Nyame wa Nyame, Amenet, and Amen. So we're going to get into more detail about the nature and structure of the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the divinities, Ntorotu, Ntorotu, so-called Ntorou, Ntorotu, and so forth, the forces in nature, their structure, and their names, their birth names. How do they come to be called these specific names? And how do we depict these names in our ancestral language of ancient Khanit and Kemet, Nubia, and Egypt, and so forth? We're going to get into details about that. Also dealing with the script. So I'm just sending out a couple of more messages, and then we're going to get started. In the meantime, of course, when you look at the UBEN-HYENG, the Ancestral Names, that's one of our books. We have 13 books in soft cover. We have 18 books total. All 18 are free ebook downloads, and then we have 13 out of the 18 that are in soft cover as well. And we do sell those. So those range between $8 and $11. We have one that's $8. About 6 of them are $9. 5 of them are $10, and one is $11. So all of the books are in that price range. We make them inexpensive. We print in color on our own printers in-house. We also have a deal for those who purchase 10 books. Any 10 books is 30% off, so you can get 10 of the books for $66 instead of $96. So that's basically $6.60 per book. Also, we have the option, if you order the entire 13-book set, that is also 30% off. So it's basically $6.60 per book, which comes out to $86 for 13 books. So you can order the entire set for $86, which is 30% off. And those permanent options are on the website, on the Nhoma page on our website, ODWIRA, F as in free, O.com, Odwirafo.com, on the Nhoma page, on the publications page. Okay. We're just sending out a couple more messages. Some people I sent some messages saying they needed the link. So we're sending that out. And I think we're okay. we're just about finished with that. And of course, if anybody had any questions, you can post them at any time about this information, or if you had a question about some of the information on the previous broadcast that you didn't get a chance to ask, of course, you can also ask questions about that as well. But right now, we're going to get into the UBEN-HYENG first. So you can download that directly, the free download directly from the website. And we have 2 more messages to send out, and then we'll get started. And we will be sending out some information with regard to the show tomorrow. Tomorrow is Egua Marketplace Day. We typically have on somebody in the community who's providing a product and or service, showcasing an Afro-Akani business that not only provides good services, products, and so forth, but also shares our ancestral values. So we'll be sending out a message on Facebook, on the website, and of course, check the our Blog Talk Radio channel for all updates, because of course we update that channel first with all the details, and then we send out event notifications on Facebook and in our Akhan group on Facebook and so forth. So always check that out to get the updates. But we will be, once we confirm the guest, then we'll be updating the information. All right, so let's get started with the UBEN-HYENG, the Ancestral Summons. And what we're going to go to is in the second section. It's called Mesura Odomankoma. That's the heading of the second section. And then there are about 8 essays in the second section. When you get down to the last 2, basically on page 19 and 20, the title of the first one we're going to get into, it says, Goddess God has emissaries, representatives in creation. And then the second one, it says, Goddess holds your name, God has your language. And we're going to get into what deities we're actually talking about. And we're going to get into that. So we need to talk about the nature and the title of even just the show. Ene, which means sounds, voices in the tree language, the sounds of the Abosom, which are in our Akhan culture, the Abosom are the spirit forces that animate creation. The deities, the goddesses and gods, of course, there are many goddesses and gods. Of course, we are not monotheistic. That is the product of the inferior mind of the Caucasian. They are incapable of actually communicating with the great God and the great goddess, the great mother and the great father. They are incapable of communicating with the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the deities, the spirit forces in creation. So therefore, they would like for us to not communicate with the actual forces in nature and manufacture fake religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, and so forth, pseudo-esotericism, in order to control the minds of our people, so that we will only listen to them and not listen to the actual forces in nature that govern us and animate us. Because when we listen to the actual forces in nature, we are empowered to restore order to our existence and exterminate our enemies, which is the whites and their offspring. So, of course, this is why they forced the foolish notion of monotheism and the fake gods associated with monotheism. So there are many Abosom. The Akhan term Abosom comes from Mosum or Mosum, which is talking about offspring. That's a term, a title of the deity, the divine offspring, in ancient Kemet and ancient Kani. And we continue to use that term, Mesu or Bosum. We still use Bosum, Abosom, and Akhan tradition today. Same language, we just migrated from the east to the west and continue to practice the same culture. The names of the various major Abosom deities, Orisha, Vodou, Ntorou, Ntorotu, misnomer Ntorou, Ntorotu, and so forth, we still use the same names of the same divinities, the same functions in creation, the same ritual colors, all of those things are still intact in our Akhan culture, in the Yoruba tradition, in the Ebe tradition, in the Fon tradition, in the Fang tradition, in the Lotsi tradition, in the various traditions across the continent. We never stopped communicating with these divinities, these forces in nature. They still possess us. They still communicate with us. They still heal us. They still empower us and motivate us. When we were forced to the Western Hemisphere during the Musuokesi, the Great Perversity, enslavement, our people drawing on the forces of nature, the Abosom as well as the Nananum Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated, spiritually cultivated, empowered by them to overthrow the whites in their offspring, those who waged war against the whites in their offspring, killed the whites in their offspring, freed themselves from enslavement, liberated other people from enslavement, established independent nations within the North America, the Central America, South America, the Caribbean, and so forth. Those of us who forced emancipation, forced abolition of enslavement because we were killing the whites in their offspring. That's what forced abolition. It had nothing to do with white people being magnanimous and understanding what they were doing is wrong. People like Denmark Vesey, people like Gabriel Prosser, people like Nat Turner, of course, David Walker, various individuals who engaged the process or planned large insurrections or engaged the actual process like Okupo Nat, warrior Nat, who waged war, killed the whites and their offspring, and freed people from plantations that was sprouting up all over the southeastern United States, wherever enslavement was happening. We were killing the whites and their offspring, and it was spreading. They saw also what happened in the Caribbean with Haiti. What happened with the Maroons in Jamaica, the Maroons in the Saramaka Maroons and others in Suriname, in amongst the people in South America, in the Brazil region, the Quilombos and so forth. So they were forced into abolition because they recognized that if they didn't move in that direction, we would massacre all of them. Then they began to retool and figure out a way to enslave us without the chains, which was through the fake religion beginning to introduce Christianity and so forth. So it was through our embrace of our ancestral religion that we freed ourselves, meaning we never stopped communicating with the forces in nature because they are connected to us by blood. The same Abosom, the same divinities that possess us, Kemet, Kanit, they're the same forces that animate the Earth Mother, animate the rivers, animate the ocean, animate the sun, moon, various stars, planets, the black substance of space, the atmosphere, fire, thunder and lightning, and so forth. Conscious living entities, conscious living spiritual entities, just like you're a conscious living spiritual entity animating a physical body. The Abosom, the Orisha, and so forth are conscious living entities who animate physical bodies. And these physical bodies are the physical bodies manifest in creation. They didn't become old and disappear. The same forces that have been animating the created universe for millions of years still are here, just like the physical universe has been here for millions of years. They have been here for millions of years, animating the physical universe. And we communicate with them like we have been doing for millions of years. So, and in a more intense way when we started engaging the process of possession. So that continued even after Musuokesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement process, also called the Ma'afa by many. So we didn't stop. In North America, in the practices called hoodoo, of course we have the article, the Akhan origin of the term hoodoo. That's an Akhan term and practice, and we go into detail about that. When you learn about juju, which is a Yoruba term, when you learn about voodoo, which is a Fon and Ebe term, you'll find that when people are engaged in these practices, the dominant cultural influences in voodoo is Fon, Ebe, and Congo and so forth. In hoodoo is Akhan, and juju is Yoruba. Of course, amongst the people, Igbo and people from Angola in the Gullah Geechee tradition, as well as the Congo and other groups, you'll find that we were in these various places in North America, in the United States, continuing to practice our ancestral religion. If you can practice possession, Akhan, and spiritual communication, then the tradition is intact, because you can communicate with the forces in nature like you've always done. You can communicate with the the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. If you can communicate with them, which we can and we do, then you cannot lose any knowledge, because the same people who built pyramids and built structures and built places in West, Central, South Africa, they are ancestresses and ancestors now, those who have not reincarnated, and we can communicate with them, so nothing is lost. The language is not lost. Ritual practices are not lost, because there's no break. So we maintain the culture through that communication. That shows there's so much tied into that. Critically, it shows that we didn't manufacture deities. We didn't imagine deities. We did not anthropomorphize nature and manufacture myths about deities. The deities, the goddesses and gods are forces in nature that we communicate with. If you do not engage with the Abosom, with the Orisha, with the Vodou, which all Aakhuamuman people can do, because it's in our blood. They are transmitted to us through our blood circle. They're connected to us spiritually through our blood circle. So all of us can communicate with the Abosom. Those who, of course, there's a tiny percentage of our people who engage in criminality and perversity who the Abosom don't deal with at all. But the vast majority of our population, we have the capacity. It is inborn and intrinsic, innate, for us to communicate with the Abosom that actually governs our spirit and governs our head and so forth. So we don't manufacture divinities. We don't create, quote-unquote, religions or spiritual practices. We attune to the actual forces in creation and harmonize with them. So if you do not engage with them, because you've been brainwashed by the whites and their offspring and people who study, quote-unquote, Egyptology, or even those who fancy themselves chematologists, yet they don't actually engage the ritual practices and actually engage the Abosom, they do not know what they're talking about at all. At best, they can comment on certain aspects of culture they've read about, certain observations that they've read about or seen by visiting parts of the continent and reporting like a news reporter on what they saw on the wall or what they witnessed when they saw somebody engaged in a certain practice. But they don't have any knowledge of the culture at all. Unless you actually engage the Abosom who actually animate the culture, you know nothing about the culture. So it doesn't matter what degree or credential, quote-unquote, you've been given by the whites and their offspring to talk about and report on the culture. You must live the culture, or you know nothing about the culture. And when we talk about living the culture, we're talking about the authentic culture, authentic ancestral religion. We call it Nanasom Aakhuamuman ancestral religion, authentic, not the perverse practice or pseudo-expression of the culture by people in the Western Hemisphere as well as people on the continent today who have been corrupted by Islam over the past 300, 400, 500 years or 1,000 years, or corrupted by Christianity or Judaism over the past couple of hundred years and have woven that nonsense into the practice and their pseudo-expression of the culture. Because all they have done is become brainwashed. They're not actually dealing with real Abosom. They're actually dealing with their deceased relatives and other deceased, discarnate spirits that they're passing off as deities and giving false information because they're brainwashed. So we're not talking about Negroes who do that on the continent, who pretend to be traditional and speak the language and wear the clothes and do everything they do and engage in ritual practices and engage in quote-unquote magical practices, and they're actually just dealing with wayward, discarnate, drunkard-type, wayward spirits who have no real power other than to report and eavesdrop on what you're doing, go back to the little priest, tell the priest what you've been doing, and when you come to the priest for divination, he can tell you what you were doing at your house and he wasn't there, and you think that you he must be dealing with the deities, because how could he possibly know what you were doing in your house in America a week ago when you traveled over to this little tiny shrine deep within the bush? He can tell you exactly what was going on, because he sent his little crackhead spirit, his little homeless spirit, to go eavesdrop on you and come tell him what was going on. Just like somebody can send a crackhead today and give him some money, they'll go and listen to your phone conversation and run back to the person and say, this is what they were talking about on the phone. So when they come to your house, this is what they were talking about. It's not because they have any spiritual power. All they did was send the crackhead, got the message, and brought it back. And when that crackhead makes his, transition, and the little earthbound, weak spirit, it will still send that crackhead-type spirit to go eavesdrop on somebody, see what they're doing, come back. They'll do a little animal sacrifice for them to give them a little surge of energy, just like when they were alive, they would give them some little crack for a surge of energy. They get that information from them, and they hoodwink the person who's coming for divination. We're not talking about Negroes like that on the continent, and they abound on the continent, just like they abound in the Western Hemisphere. Pseudo-spiritualists, we're not talking about them, we're talking about authentic culture. Authentic culture is inborn. When you're born into the world, you come into the world with Abosom connected to you. You come into the world with Orisha connected to you, transmitted by blood, assigned to you by Nyame wa Nyame, Amanet Amen, the Supreme Being. That happens pre-incarnation. Before you even get into the womb, the Abosom are assigned to you by the Supreme Being. And then you're ushered into a specific blood circle by your Nananom Nsamanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated. So those who usher you into a specific womb or a specific blood circle, as well as the Abosom, they're connected to you pre-incarnation. So by the time you're born into the world, you're already connected. So you're not dependent on anybody outside of you to give you Abosom, Orisha, and so forth, because they cannot. Only Nyame wa Nyame can give you divinity, assigned to you forces in creation. The nature of them, when we learn about their names, their birth names, so to speak, and the sounds associated with them, and how these names develop from them, from their movements, then we can understand how they come into being and why they're identified in a certain fashion, why they have certain ritual colors associated with them. And we can see these are actual forces in nature. It's not something we created. And they're constant. So when we talk about, you can't even fall into the trap, even if you haven't learned about true historical information yet. For example, we express through the KUKUU-TUNTUM, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, our book, as well as the audio files, proving that Jesus and Muhammad and Moses and Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, David, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, all of these characters are fictional cartoon characters who never existed of any race or any form. That includes Yahweh and Allah and Brahman and Buddha as well. Fictional cartoon characters, Bilal, all of them. We go into that information, detail that information. But even for people who haven't gotten to that information yet, when you actually attune to the forces in nature, you'll never fall into the trap of believing, well, there were, people just manufactured some deities, and they were actually Hebrews when they came to West Africa, and, they lost the culture, and now all these are expressions of Hebrew culture in West Africa. That's pure nonsense. Or saying Islam is an ancient tradition. The people who push the notion that Hebrewism, Islam are ancient traditions, they know for certain that Islam and Hebrewism are not ancient traditions. They are liars. They are deliberately lying. So don't fall into the trap that these people actually believe what they're saying. They know the actual information. They know it's inaccurate. Their goal is to lie to you and to us and try to force that false information because they are agents of the whites and their offspring. That's what Muslim teachers are. That's what Hebrew teachers are. They are agents of the whites and their offspring. Their organizations are funded and have always been funded and supported by the whites and their offspring. Of course, they don't share that information because that would, expose them and destroy their pseudo-credibility. But they have always been that, and that's what they are, and that's what they teach. That's why they teach what they teach. They know it's false. That's why they teach it. So we don't fall into that foolish trap. But when you learn trucery, you know that automatically. But when you actually embrace the culture, then you know for certain because you're actually dealing with the same deity. Talked about Ra and RA-RAIT in ancient Kemet, you're still dealing with Ra and RA-RAIT today. Talk about Amen and Amenet in ancient Kemet, you're still dealing with Amen or Nyame and Nyamewa today. Never stopped. So we're going to get into the nature of these divinities, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. And it'll be clear after tonight exactly who these deities are and how they come into being, how they manifest, the names that they have, the character that they have, and so forth. So, UBEN-HYENG, the ancestral jurisdiction. If you look on page 19, the UBEN-HYENG is not, you can look, as you scroll through, you can obviously find page 19. It's in the second section, last two essays in the second section. We purposely didn't number the pages when we first published this text in 12,998, December 12,998, which is in the Gregorian calendar, December 1997, on the winter solstice, the name, or what is called the winter solstice. That's when the text was released. That's when we published it. And there was a reason why we published it the way we did. So, and just to give some background, the way the UBEN-HYENG came, we were not planning to write the UBEN-HYENG. We were actually working on something else. The Nananum Nsamanfo spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of ours directed us to begin to write these different series of what would be considered essays. It's the information that the Nananum Nsamanfo wanted to get out. So we would listen to what they had to say, start writing what we felt like the Nsamanfo were saying. We'll go to the shrine in the evening, ask if what was written was correct. When things were not correct, and we would go back, edit again, go back to the shrine, ask if it was correct. If it was correct, then that essay was done. Then we would go to the next one. So it was a long process of going through that. It took a number of months to produce this work. But this is what it is. And, of course, when you study the work, you'll find that this is the foundational cultural practices of Aakhuamuman people worldwide. So these principles are fundamental to our religious practice. We deal with the various ritual practices, what their functionality are, what their value is, and why they are necessary. Everything we engage in, whether it's libations, shrine consultation, ritual dance, ritual song, spirit possession, whatever it is that we engage in, all of it has a functionality. We are receiving, processing, and transmitting tumi, or power, energy, in a specific fashion, in a measurable fashion, in a quantifiable fashion. If we are not receiving, processing, and transmitting tumi, or energy, in a measurable fashion, then we do not engage in the process. No rituals in ancestral religion are symbolic, or just representations that look nice. This is not Catholicism when they do little hand gestures and other little nonsense that mean absolutely nothing. They say, well, this represents that, and this represents that, and this is symbolic. That's idiocy. If you're not receiving, transmitting, and processing energy in a specific, measurable fashion, then you're doing nothing, and it's not a real ritual. So every ritual practice, every movement is functional and has value in Aakhuamuman ancestral religion across the board, wherever we are found in the world. So that's the nature of this book, UBEN-HYENG, and then these two essays we're going to get into get directly to the subject matter of tonight. So the first one, we're going to go through. Each essay is just one page. There's a great deal of information that we need to go through in that one page, as you'll see. So the first one says, God has emissaries, representatives in creation. That's the title. So we're going to go through the text, and we'll explain along the way. It starts out, and these are the words of the Nsamanfo. Movement presupposes energy. Movement, or energy vibrations, reveals sound. Such vibrations are essential to the manifestation of time. So, before we go further, movement, of course, presupposes energy. You can't have movement unless there's energy to cause movement. So, movement presupposes energy. That's their first statement. The second statement is movement or energy vibrations, which is what movement is, reveal sound. We know that if you have a string that's taut, like a guitar string, you make it vibrate. Once it begins to vibrate, sound is revealed. So movement or energy vibrations reveal sound. Such vibrations are essential to the manifestation of time. Creation is governed by time. Time orders or measures the cyclical manifestation of power. So when we're talking about the sound vibrations moving, expanding, and contracting, sound waves going up and down, now up, down, now you're counting, now time is manifest. It's a cyclical manifestation of power. That's what time does. It orders or it measures the cyclical manifestation of power. Those vibrations that we talked about that come from energy. When we say movement presupposes energy, the energy, the inert energy in the black substance of space, noon and noonet, that inert energy, once it connects and begins to become activated, it gives birth to Ra and RA-RAIT, the divine fire and light spiraling and bursting forth in the black substance, become the first light in creation. We talked about that yesterday. Noon and noonet are the mother and father of Ra and RA-RAIT. So that movement, Ra and RA-RAIT, presupposes energy, noon and noonet. So this is what it's talking about. So it says time orders or measures the cyclical manifestation of power. Ra and RA-RAIT spiral through the black substance of space, carving out black spheres which later become stars. Their spirit penetrates the bodies of those new stars and enliven them and make them luminous. Those stars eventually give birth to planets. The spirit of Ra and RA-RAIT moves through the planets, penetrates the planets, enlivens them, lightens them up, makes them fertile and so forth, and it continues to go forward. So it says time orders or measures the cyclical manifestation of power, that things may come into existence, and we just talked about that. All things produce emanations, which are reflective of power, which is governed by time. So everything, whether it's plant life, animal life, mineral life, Aakhuamuman, human life, all things produce emanation. Just by virtue of the fact that you're breathing, expanding, and contracting, there are emanations coming from you that are reflective of the power that's moving through you. And that, of course, is governed by time. And we're going to get more in detail about that. Vibratory waves may manifest as longer or shorter. Vibratory rates may be faster or slower, from beginning to ending to beginning, from light to dark to light, from expansion to contraction and back to expansion. All wavelengths of vibratory energy, all rates come into being as various representatives of creative power. So there's representations of creative power. You have Ra and RA-RAIT, and they create all the other various Abosom, representatives of creative power. Some Abosom have more fiery energy, and they move in a certain fashion. Some have more cool, slower energy. They manifest in a certain fashion. This is what we're talking about. Every representative or phase of creative power vibrating through space generates its own sound or sound. Sound imbues space with colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. Is sunlight not broken into a band of colors, a rainbow, when refracted by rain or mist? So first of all, when the vibrations begin, Ra and RA-RAIT breaking out of the black substance of space and exploding to fire and light and moving through the black substance of space, spiraling through the black substance, carving out black spheres. Of course, in physics, black spheres, stars are black bodies because of the nature of their structure, and the energy that moves through those black bodies causes them to become luminous, quote-unquote burning, like a piece of coal burning and becoming, radiant, basically, in a sense, kind of like an analogy to draw to that. So Ra and Ra-RAIT moving through the black substance, carving out black spheres of black substance. Those black spheres become radiant. Those become the first stars. Those stars, projectiles, eventually give birth to planets. They become the planets in their little solar systems. That includes that little black sphere that was our planet in the beginning and so forth. We're talking about Ra and Ra-RAIT moving through the various aspects of these various created entities. And once Ra and Ra-RAIT move through the newly created spheres and enliven them and transfer a portion of their divine living energy to me into these entities, then they become children of Ra and Ra-RAIT. The stars, including our sun, various planets, and the features in the planets are the children of Ra and Ra-RAIT. Ra and Ra-RAIT come out of the black substance. They create all things, and then those things are the children of Ra and Ra-RAIT. So this is what we're talking about with every representative or phase of creative power. The planets become a phase of creative power, a little portion of creative power, just like a portion of your body, the sperm cell of a male and a portion of the body of the female, the ovum cell of the female. There's a union of the sperm and ovum, becomes a zygote. Eventually, 40 weeks later, the baby is born. That's a little portion of your body walking around right now. Part of you leaves your body, and it's walking around. Of course, the spirit is sent into that physical vessel by Nyamewa, Nyame, and so forth. So that's your child. It's the same thing with Ra and Ra-RAIT. They come out of the black substance of space, creating the stars, planets, and so forth. In the midst of that process, one of the divinities that they give birth to is Ptah, who actually fashions the specifications of the planets and gives them detail. We talked about that last night, but the creation of those entities out of nothing, out of the black substance, that's Ra and Ra-RAIT. They create things out of nothing, out of the black substance, out of no thing, out of that black plasma, that dark energy, dark matter, Ka and Kayet. Once they create something out of nothing, and now that something actually exists, then Ptah fashions those things and refines them and gives them definition and detail according to the dictates of Inyamewa Nyame. But it's Ra and Ra-RAIT, the creator and creatress, that give birth to things out of nothing. They are directed by the great being Amen and Amenet. So again, as we always say, Amen, Amenet, or Nyame, Nyamewa Akhan, the great father, great mother, they are the supreme being. They give birth to the creator and creatress. So the creator and creatress are grandchildren of the supreme being. The analogy we use, of course, is like your body, you as an Afurakani man, Afurakani woman, you're two beings. The life force energy that surges through you that you can direct to your muscle groups to engage in powerful interactions, direct to your reproductive organs for procreative power to create children. You can direct that energy to different parts of your body. That is your Ra force, male Ra-RAIT force, female Nyankopon force, and Nyankonton force, as we say in Akhan, Odumare and Oshumare, in the Yoruba tradition, Da and Ida Huedo in the Vodou tradition, that you're the great being and you're directing your procreative power to serve you, to go out and create. Amen and Amenet direct Ra and Ra-RAIT to go out and create. They're the great being, the supreme being, and they direct the creator and creatress to create. So for the fools who try to say that Christianity and Islam and Judaism and so forth it's all really the same thing and we're all worshiping the same God, so why are we arguing? That nonsense is out the window because they don't recognize the difference between, number one, a great mother and a great father, and then the creator and creatress are actually grandchildren of the great mother and the great father. And of course in the KUKUU-TUNTUM we show that Yahweh is a fictional character and we show where that character comes from. We show that Allah is a fictional character and how they corrupted a title of Ra to manufacture Allah. They still, and that character, of course, is a fictional character even though they took the title of Ra. But even if some will try to say, well, Allah is really Ra, which is not, they still don't recognize Amen or Amenet. And they don't recognize Ra-RAIT in reality. And then Allah, that fictional character, has nothing to do with Yahweh, a fictional character, which is a corruption of a title of Tahuti, which is a totally different deity. and Buddha the corruption of Ptah, which is a totally different divinity. So they corrupted a title of Ra to manufacture Allah, a title of Tahuti to manufacture Yahweh, a title of Ptah to manufacture Buddha. None of those entities are actually the supreme being in the first place. So any argument they put forward is nonsense. All right, so we're going to get back. So we get back into every representative phase of creative power vibrating through space, generates its own sound, or sound imbues space with colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. And for those who try to say that, there's no sound in space because space is a vacuum, that's what the whites and their offspring have taught for a century or more. Of course, our people have understood all along that what they call space or nothing is Ka and Kaet, male and female divinity, the black substance of space. So it's actually a substance, a plasma. Just recently, over the past couple of years, when the whites and their offspring started recasting what they're teaching and saying, well, actually space is not just a void or a vacuum, it's actually dark energy and dark matter, which is actually Ka and Kaet, which we've always known because we worship these divinities and they communicate with us on a daily basis. Now they're saying, well, we discovered that actually sound can move through a space that, through a vacuum, quote unquote. They think that's a discovery. In reality, it's not. So, as sound is moving, vibrations are moving through space, they generate colors, and they imbue space with colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. And just like we say, it's sunlight not broken into a band of colors as a rainbow when refracted by rain or mist. So when you see, a rainbow, whether it's in the sky because of rain or mist, refracts. The mist bends the light, refracts the light, and a rainbow is generated, and you see what qualities are in the white light. It just manifests that way. If you see a puddle and you see, sunlight shining through the puddle, the light is broken up or bent or refracted, and you see the qualities that are within the white light. It's broken up into a band of colors and so forth. Sound vibrations moving through space generate or imbue space with colors based on the nature of the vibration. The difference between colors is the rate of vibration. That's the only difference between colors. And sound waves are the foundational vibration that later give birth to life. The sound comes first. When we talk about Amen and Amenet, they're called Ganga Ur, Ganga Urit, or Urit. The great Ur Ganga. Ga means to cackle. A goose is called a ga or nga in ancient Kemet, meaning cackling, because when you hear a goose, it sounds like nga, nga. So they when they see that bird walking by, they say, there goes a ganga, or nganga, a cackler. Even the term cackler, a kakru, comes from gangur or gangaur from ancient Kemet. In our book, Anidaho Awareness, when we talk about the origin of the term God, and we show that God comes from Ga, Ganga, a title of Amen, and it means, in Proto-Indo-European languages, it means to invoke and also to pour, as in pour libation, but also to invoke or to call. That's because Ga means to invoke. It also means to pour, as in to pour libation. So we're going into detail about that to prove that's where the term God comes from. It's a corruption of a title of Amen and Amenet. They take the form of the great goose and the great gander. At the beginning of creation, they're swimming through the black substance of space, that great watery substance. Began the mating call. They began to cackle, Ganga, Ganga Ur, Ganga Urit, the great cacklers, and they began to release sound vibrations. Those sound vibrations cause the black substance to begin to wave, gives birth to Hehu and Hehud and Nun and Nunet. When the waves become very rapid, Nun and Nunet, the wavy energy within the black substance, activates, unites, and gives birth to spherical forms that rise up out of the black substance, fire, light, and heat that explode and manifest as the first light in creation, that is Ra and Ra-RAIT. Just like you have water in a pot that's still, when you add heat to it, it begins to vibrate. That expansion and contraction of heat, Hehu and Hehut, that original heat and breath, quote unquote, then the water begins to vibrate, and the symbol of Nun and Nunet, the wavy energy in Nun and Nunet's name are spelled with a wavy line, a wavy watery line in the language of ancient Kemet. In fact, the letter N is just a truncated version of that wavy line, that wavy watery line or electromagnetic wave. The letter N is a corruption of that line. It's just truncated into a couple of pieces instead of like seven different waves. They just cut it down to 1.5, and that's the letter N. But Nun and Nunet coming together, those vibratory waves, just like the water waving as it's beginning to wave, but then once it waves very rapidly, the waves turn into spirals, which becomes bubbles that rise up out the pot and explode, and is heat contained within those bubbles. It's the same process with the black substance of space, the dark energy, dark matter, begins to wave after the cackling, the sound vibration. So the first thing that happens is Amen and Amenet begin to cackle, ganga, ganga, releasing sound vibrations to make that matter move. It begins to wave. Eventually it gives birth to those spheres. So sound imbues space with color. If the vibrations of the sound eventually give birth to Ra-RAIT, sound imbues space with colors according to the nature or corresponding to the nature of the vibration. So, and as we said before, the differences in colors are simply the different rates of vibrations. Slower vibrations give certain colors, and then those faster moving vibrations, faster moving, hotter burning, fiery energy gives that lighter colors and so forth. So, and the slower vibrations are darker colors and so forth. So, collections of sounds are groups of various vibrations, together generating geometric patterns in space. Does rapid movement, vibration not generate heat? Is heat not expansive? Does expansion not call forth contraction or cooling? Are expansion and contraction not essential as dynamics of form? Are heat and cooling not essential as dynamics of form on the physical plane? These are the questions that the Nsimampo asked and put to us to show us what's actually happening, to remind us of what's happening. Collections of sounds are groups of various vibrations, and as the groups of various vibrations continue to vibrate, not only do they generate colors corresponding to the nature of that vibration, whether they're fast-moving vibrations or slow-moving vibrations, but they also generate geometric patterns in space. The vibrations are expansive and contracted. You have expansion and contraction in various forms generates geometric patterns. And that's the nature of form. Expansion and contraction deals with heat and cooling. Expansive energy is heat, fire. Contractive energy is cooling. Heat and cooling are the dynamics of form. That's why they give birth to geometric patterns in space. Every phase, representative or phase of energy emanating from spirit, meaning Ra and Ra'et, as a creative function through time, is a personality, a deity, a phase of consciousness emanating from the divine source of all consciousness. Each deity is either male or female, predominantly expansive or contractive in power, character, behavior. So the more expansive forces are male, the contractive forces predominantly are female. That determines their character, power, behavior, whose vibrations generate higher or lower pitched sounds, meaning feminine or masculine voices, thereby revealing its own name. So we stop right there. So you have a spirit force moving through creation. As it vibrates through creation, depending on the nature of the vibration, whether it's fast or slow, it generates a certain color, a certain geometric pattern in space, a higher or lower pitched sound, which is its own name. You're talking about the differences between spiritual forces generating their own color, generating their own form, generating their own voice because of their movement through space. Next, the form vehicle through which spirit operates determines personality, consciousness. Is there not one source of air on earth which all humans share? Is there not one spirit by which all things have life? We're talking about Apura, Kani, Apura, Kaitni humans, specifically. When spirit is housed in a lion, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the lion? When spirit is housed in the dove, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the dove? When spirit is housed in a human, talking about RA-RAIT humans, does it not manifest as a personality and consciousness peculiar to that person? And we're talking about because each person has a different form. Spirit moves through a certain form, it generates a certain collection of vibration. We talked about this yesterday, and we're going to get into it later. If you have air in your lungs, if you blow that air through a trumpet, you get one sound. You use your same lungs and blow the same air through a tuba, because it has a different form, you get a deeper sound. If you blow the same air through a clarinet, because the form is different, you get a different sound. You blow it through a flute, you get a different sound. The same air, but because it's moving through a different form, a geometric form, the sounds that emanate are different. Because we have different forms as human beings, human beings, nobody looks exactly like you unless you have an identical twin. The collection of vibrations that emanate from your unique, peculiar form is going to be different than the collection of vibrations that emanate from somebody else's form, and different from the form of an animal, different from the form of plant life or mineral life and so forth. That specific, unique configuration of vibrations that emanates from your form is your actual name. The same with the Abosom. And they give that example, and then they say, what of the personality and consciousness? So when spirit is housed in a lion, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the lion? When spirit, meaning the spirit energy of Ra and RA-RAIT, is housed in a dove, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the dove? When spirit is housed in an RA-RAIT human, does it not manifest as a personality and consciousness peculiar to that person? What of the personality and consciousness of the forces which determine the form of all things, the goddesses, the gods, the deities, the Abosom, the Orisha? What of these various representatives of divine power operating through the medium of space generate their own sounds, voices, colors, and geometric patterns, images and forms, their own genders, powers, male expansive, female contractive, names, personalities, behaviors? Who speaks against the goddesses and gods, is what the Nananom and Samafo say. Are you not consciousness as physical form, pattern after an image of various colors with your own voice, gender, name, personality, behavior? Goddess God has emissaries, representatives in creation. Are you of Goddess God? So what and that's talking about Amen and Amenet. So what they're saying and showing us is when a force moves through creation, when a spiritual force moves through space, it generates, the vibrations generate sounds. As soon as something moves, if you have a rope and you spin it around and over your head, you can hear a whistling sound. You can replicate that sound with your voice, and that's the sound that the rope makes. When a spirit whips through or moves through or circulates through or spirals through creation, it generates first sound vibration. The expansive and contractive movement also generates expansive and contractive energy, heat and cooling, which generates form, geometric patterns. When the sound vibrations are also moving, they also generate specific colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. The slower moving vibrations, darker colors, faster moving, lighter colors, and so forth. So this spirit, as it moves, depending on how it moves, if it moves in a slower fashion or in a certain way, it'll generate a certain color, a certain collection of vibrations, a certain geometric pattern. So now the spirit has a color, spirit has a geometric pattern, a certain shape or image. As it's moving, the sound waves that it emanates, it has a certain kind of voice, a sound, higher pitched or lower pitched, depending on the vibration. So it has a form, it has a color, it has a voice, and it has a specific, when it's moving through that specific form, it has a certain kind of character or personality based on the form that it generates. So therefore, you have an entity. You have a conscious entity, a child of Ra and RA-RAIT, that has its own form, has its own image, has its own color, its own voice, its own personality, its own consciousness. Now, how are you, a spirit that's conscious, has a physical form, pattern after an image of various colors, with your own voice, gender, name, personality, and behavior, yet the deities can't have that. The whites and their offspring want you to believe that you can be a conscious, reasoning, living entity with your own geometric form, with your own voice, with your own peculiar behavior, consciousness based on the energy that moves through you. But the forces in nature who actually create the universe and sustain the universe, they can't have a consciousness. They can't have a form that's absurd. The whites and their offspring don't want us to understand how they come into being. But this piece demonstrates their nature, their form, how they manifest, how they come into being directly from Ra and RA-RAIT, and based on the nature of their movement that determines their form, voice, personality, behavior, and so forth, and consciousness. Just like it is with us on a much lesser magnitude. So this is why in the Medutu, the so-called hieroglyphics, the specific major, phonetic symbols, which would be called phonetic symbols, they have a specific form, and the names of the divinities manifest through these forms. So the names of the deities we don't just name. As we said, when the spirit moves through space, it generates sound vibrations. If you attune to those sound vibrations and replicate them with your vocal cords, you are actually announcing or enunciating the name of the deity. As the spirit moves through space, it generates its own forms. It emanates its own sound vibrations that's unique to it, because no other spirit has the same specific form or movement in creation. So the collection of sound vibrations emanating from that force is actually the name of the divinity. The same is true of us. So when we hear that, just like if you hear a car zip by you and it says zoom, you can repeat that. But when a spirit moves through creation, it creates its own collection, a unique collection of vibrations. When we hear that, we can repeat that, and that's actually the name of the divinity, which is an expression of its nature. So we don't just name, we didn't just say, hey, well, Ra, we're going to call the deity Ra, and we're going to call this other deity Ptah. It doesn't happen like that. When that spirit manifests and as it moves through space, we can attune to that force of nature. We can hear its movement and communicate with that force of nature and repeat what we're hearing. And of course, that's the name of the divinity is tied into its nature. So, for example, when you look at the Medutu, they reflect that pictorially, and they also reflect it, of course, in the name of the divinity. So you have a divinity like Ra, for example. We talked about Ra rising out of the black substance of space is Khan Kaet, and then the inert energy within the black substance is Nun and Nunet. Why are they called Nun and Nunet? And when you look at the hieroglyphic symbol, the Medut, that makes up the letter N, it's a wavy line. It looks like electromagnetic wave, also a wave of water, but it's an electromagnetic wave. Nun and Nunet. Well, first of all, as they move through creation, if you attune to them, you will hear them, and the energy literally manifests as Nun and Nunet. You'll hear that because that's their actual name. Even when we replicate their name, we have to actually replicate the symbol that makes up the Medutu, that wavy line. Where does the wavy line come from? But when their energy moves through the black substance of space, it manifests a wavy line, just like when water begins to vibrate, eventually the waves manifest, and you can see waves in the water that's carrying energy back and forth from one part of the pot to the other. You see waves in the water of the ocean carrying energy back and forth throughout that space. But when we replicate that sound, the air in our lungs goes up through our trachea, and when we put our tongue to the roof of the mouth, then you have the air going through the mouth, but then when the tongue is touching the roof of the mouth, then that can go from the mouth up to the nasal cavity, through the mouth, through the nasal cavity, through the mouth, through the nasal cavity, and so forth. And that up and down movement of the air creates the wavy line symbol actually inside of us, as we were saying, Nun. And when you say Nun, and you have your tongue up there, that air has to go through the mouth and the nose. If you close your nose and try to say noon, then you cut off that sound. So it has to go up, down, the nasal cavity and the oral cavity has to go up and down, as long as you're saying noon, you're replicating the actual form of the hieroglyphic symbol as you speak the name. That's where the symbol is coming from. It's a replication of that. So that's noon and noonet. The T cuts off or feminizes a noun. Why does the T, the medut, cut off or feminize the noun? Why doesn't B feminize the noun in ancient command? Why is it amen and amenet, ra and raet or rat, or ka and kaet? Why is it the T sound as well as the medut or hieroglyphic symbol for the T? Why is it that they decided was going to be the feminizer, and it manifests in English like Paul and Paulette, Anton, Antoinette, anything that's a diminutive or feminine is the S and so forth. Did they just decide, well, we're going to use T? Why don't we just use, we could have used B or K, but we're just going to use T. Well, did they have a choice? They didn't have a choice. It had to be T because that's the T sound, which actually cuts off the vibratory frequency. And the symbol is actually, if you look at the symbol, it looks like a bowl, an upside-down bowl, round on the top, flat on the bottom. It looks like, if you had a circle and you cut the circle in half, and the top hemisphere and the bottom hemisphere is like a bowl right side up, and the top hemisphere is a bowl upside down. That upside-down bowl, that looks, they'll call it a loaf, but they'll say that's the symbol for T. And they just made it a T. Why did they make that symbol a T and also the one that feminized? If you look at the earth itself, and you look up, when you're standing on earth and you look up, it looks like, when you look up in the sky, it looks like a canopy. It looks like the upper half of a calabash. It takes the very same symbol. It contains everything within that circular half. But even when you say T or T, if you're saying Ra, and then you say Ra-RAIT, and you cut it off. If you stop right there, when you put the tongue of the mouth, the tongue touching the roof of the mouth, when you're cutting off the air comes up again through your lungs into your trachea. It goes into the mouth. The roof of the mouth is curved, and then the flat surface is the tongue, which is touching the roof of the mouth. It actually, the air in your mouth takes the form of the letter T, the medut for the letter T, the upside-down bowl. The roof of your mouth is rounded. The flat bottom portion is the tongue touching the front of the teeth and cutting off the energy. So when you say T or Hut, the life force energy that's in the air has to take the form of the letter T, of that upside-down bowl. It's rounded on the top. The tongue is flat on the bottom. And it actually, if you were to take a snapshot of the inside of your mouth and the life force energy that's taking the form when you say tut and put the T, the tongue at the roof of the mouth, you actually will see the life force energy take the form of that medut. So therefore, when you cut off the energy and make it concrete and concretize it by cutting off the movement of the energy and stopping it, tut, then what you're doing is producing the letter T. That's why the letter T, the T symbol, is the concretizing force. You have expansion, but you then have contraction. If a snowball is growing, for example, rolling down a hill, is expanding and expanding and expanding, it's not an actual thing until you stop the expansion and contraction puts the brakes on it, so now you have an entity. You don't have an entity if something just keeps growing and it never stops growing because it's never a thing. But once it stops growing, once the expansion is checked by contraction, now you have an entity. When the life force energy is moving through your lungs, up into your mouth through the air, and it takes the form of and you say T, and you cut off the movement of the air, and it can no longer go forward, it takes the form of that letter T, that upside-down bowl. Just like when the life force energy is circulating through the planet Earth and it reaches the atmosphere, it can go no higher, the air can go no higher than the atmosphere. It's trapped in that circular upside-down bowl, upper half of the calabash. That's the form that the life force energy takes, concretized or finished being formed, That's why the letter T concretizes or makes things form. That's where it comes from. If you look at the term, the name Ra, when the life force energy of Nun, when Nun and Nunet, the primordial wave energy within the black substance, if you listen to their movement, just like you can listen to a car humming and you can repeat it, or a refrigerator's motor when you're listening in the kitchen, it just says hum. If you listen to the movement of Nun and Nunet, those deities, as they operate in creation, the sound vibrations that emanate from them is Nun and Nunet, expansion and contraction. That's their actual names. When they move, they generate those sounds. When they begin to be active and unite, and the wave energy eventually gives birth to the spiraling energy which will rise up out of the black substance as spheres of fire and light, Ra and RA-RAIT. The N energy, the wave energy, becomes very rapid. Just like in the pot of water, the waves begin to wave so rapidly that they give birth to spheres. The wave becomes a circle. The waves become spheres, and those spheres rise up. So Ra and RA-RAIT rise up out of the Nun, rise up out of the Nunet. That's why they say Nu is the father of Ra. Ra rises out of Nu and so forth. So the wave energy, Nun, gives birth to the spiraling vibration of Ra and RA-RAIT. And when Ra and RA-RAIT move and you listen to their energy, it's no longer just a N energy. It becomes a moving vibratory frequency, a more powerful frequency. So when you say Nun and you continue to say Nun very fast, the N or the wave becomes a rolling R. The N, of course, is the tongue tapping the roof of the mouth once, but the rolling R, the way we pronounce it in our traditional languages, is that N or tongue tapping the roof of the mouth very rapidly, so rapidly that the N becomes an R. Nun becomes Ra, or Ra rises up out of Nun. The Nun becomes R, and that N becomes R. Nun becomes Ra. And the Ra symbol is of course, they'll show the sun, but the Ra sound is the vibratory frequency that's powerful. Those vibrations are powerful. So you have the Ra sound, and then the most expansive sound you can possibly make with your mouth is Ah. Of course, U is contracted. E is very contracted. If you took a piece of chalk and, ran it across a chalkboard and made it screech, you would hear the shrill E sound. That's very contracted. O is more deep and melodious, but Ah is the most expansive sound you can possibly make. And what you're doing is replicating the most expansive power that you can generate, that you can hear in creation. The vibratory power of the Ra sound with the expansive Ah sound is Ra. When that spirit moves through creation, you hear the rumbling energy, and then you hear the expansive Ah sound. And you can repeat that with your voice, because that's the sound that spirit makes as he moves through creation, and that's why his name is literally Ra. And you hear that force, those sound vibrations when you attune to that divinity. And when that expansive force, Ra, is, contracts, Ra, that becomes Ra or Ra-RAIT. That's the contractive aspect. So it's a male and female divinity. When they move through creation, they generate those sound vibrations. And, of course, the Medutu reflects that. So when you look at the symbol for the letter R, it's the same symbol. It looks like an open mouth. It looks like a circle, but it's like an open mouth. That's the same form that you make your mouth, put your mouth in, position it in order to make the rolling R sound. So every symbol in command, even if you have the B sound, the B sound, that explosive sound, or the P sound, the way you make your lips to do the B sound or the P sound, when you look at the symbol from ancient Kemet, the various symbols, you see that they take the same form that the life force energy takes within your mouth, within your body, when you're making those sounds to generate that explosive energy. So every single Medu that's phonetic. It's connected to the way the energy moves and what shape the energy takes as it's moving through creation when it generates those sounds. And we created or simply redrew those symbols based on that principle, based on the form that the life force energy takes when it's generating those sounds, whether it's in creation or within the mouth or the body of the person as they're generating the sound. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so I just want to go through the chat room real quick to make sure we didn't have any. And if you have a question, of course, you can type it in the chat room at any time, question or a comment about the information. If you have a question or comment on the phone line, of course, just hit the number 1, and your hand will be raised, and we can see, we can call on you. So we want to show that the names of their birth names and names, sound waves, sound vibrations, voices. We don't just name the deities. They're named actually ultimately by Nyame because they decided what kind of divinities were going to come forth. They give birth to them. They have their own form, their own voice, of course, the way they move through creation. They generate their own sounds, their own names, and we replicate that, and that's the name of the force of nature. So therefore, we know who they are. The only way we can attune to them and know who their names are, what their names are, is to actually communicate with them, get possessed by them, communicate with them via divination, through ritual song, ritual dance, libation, shrine consultation, ancestral communication, deity communication, and so forth. They come forward, they show themselves as they move through creation. They generate their own colors. There are sacred colors associated with the divinities. When you see red associated with Heru, it's because the way that fiery energy moves and generates that reddish tint, that reddish energy that imbues space as that force moves. It's like if you have fire and it's burning, it looks yellowish. When it begins to really burn and consume, it starts looking reddish. The way the energy is moving and operating in creation generates its own color. Of course, you can have a flame that has a blue flame. The way it's moving, the way it's operating in creation, it generates its own color. So when the forces in nature, the various female and male Abosom are moving through creation, they generate their own colors, and these are the sacred colors of the divinities. That's why they have the same sacred colors in one culture to the next, because they're not just about, oh, we like this color, we're going to say this is a sacred color of this deity, we're going to give her a name, we're going to give her a form, we're going to draw her in a certain way. We're just very imaginative, and it's like somebody writing a novel or a story. We'll just make up characters and give them clothes and give them colors, and we don't do that. We actually attune to the forces in nature and see what their colors are. We listen to their names as they move and as they teach, and of course they will teach us and tell us what their names are as well. But one of the ways you can attune to that is to listen as they move through creation. So this is where their nature comes from. This is where their names come from. This is where their forms come from and everything else. So that's the piece dealing with the emissaries in creation, the representatives of the creative power of RA-RAIT, the deity. And then tied to that, the next piece deals with, it says, Goddess holds your name, God has your language. The goddess we're talking about, Renutet, or Renutet, or Renunet, which is talking about the deity that governs names. There's male and female divinity, Renin, Reninet, in ancient Kemet, and they talk about them governing names and so forth. So we're going to get into that because it's directly tied, because it's also directly tied to our own names as well. But before we get into that, we have a caller. Amichiabo, number 3139, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, Amichiabo. Yeah, you know, you probably get into it. About the names, like the days of the week, right? And I was born on Judah. And I see how you have it labeled, Abosom, and so I'm having a hard time understanding exactly, like, who am I addressing when I need to communicate with who I belong to. I'm trying to understand that part of it.
Okay, so you're talking about the in the Akhan tradition, the 7 days of the week for people who who don't know, who listening in don't know. She's talking about the 7 days of the week in the Akhan calendar, and various groups use different calendars. So like the Yoruba use a 5-day week, and the Igbo use a 4-day week, and the Igbo have their own names associated with the 4-day week. The Yoruba don't use a day naming process per se. They have another process, but they get to the same result, but they have another process of naming. So everybody doesn't use the same process. So in Akhan culture, it's a 7-day week. Each day of the week is named after the Abosom that govern the solar or lunar or planetary bodies that govern that day of the week. So Sunday is governed by the sun, Monday governed by the moon, Tuesday governed by Benna or Abena, which is the planet so-called Mars. Wednesday is governed by Awuku and Akua, governed by the planet so-called Mercury, but Akua. Thursday, Yauda, and Yada is governed by, and Abada is governed by the Abosom, Yao, Ya, and Abba, which is Jupiter, but also Uranus and Neptune, and then Afi, Friday, governed by the planet Afi, and the spirit that animates Afi is Afi or Afia, which in ancient Kemet is called Heheru. In Akhan, Afi, Afia. She's also called Cheche in Akhan, which is the same name. And then Saturday is governed by Saturn, Amen Min, as well as Min Minit, which is deity Min in ancient Kemet, and a form of Heheru called Min Minit, and so forth. So each day of the week is governed by a planetary body, but the spirits, major spirits that animate those planetary bodies, or the solar or lunar bodies, those are the spirits that govern the day. So, and this is, again, it's for people who are actually Akhan. When they find out they're Akhan, this applies. If they're from a different group, the other groups have their own way of doing this, but they don't always use the day of the week, but they get to the same result ultimately. So for people who are Akhan, you're born on Joada. Jo means cool. Joada means a day of coolness, but it's also a title of the cool moon. So celestial body is the moon. Jo sometimes the male divinity operating, major male divinity operating through the moon. Ajo, major female divinity operating through the moon. Ajoa, in ancient Kemet, that's Alsar and Alset, when they're called Watch and Wacho, Uchao. The word for I is Ucha. One of the titles is Uchau, Uchait. It's the same as Aju and Ajua and Akhan. So Alsar operating through the moon, Ajo, Alset operating through the moon is Ajua. So a female born on Joada, the deity governing that will be Ajua, which is Alset. Your Kra, your soul, the little force of nature that dwells in your head region, she's a little mini version of Alset. Alset is her mother. So that deity that dwells in your head region, she has the same characteristics, the same cool energy. Her name is Ajua as well because she comes from the great Ajua. So that divinity governs your head. So you would have your Kra's name is Ajua. Just like I'm born on Sunday, my Kra or Kradim, my soul's name is Kwesi or Kwa Awusi, servant Kwa of Awusi, a servant of Awusi, Kwesi. Somebody who's born on Benada or Tuesday, a male would be called Kwa Bena because his soul is a Kwa, a servant or a subject of Bena, so he's Kwa Bena, and the same thing across the board. So being born on Monday, the deity itself, the Akradim Bosom itself, is Nana Ajua, which is offset. Your soul, your Pra, the little force that dwells in your head region, she's an Ajua because she came through Nana Ajua. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're
Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Okay. So, let want to make sure we didn't miss anything, any other comments. And we have the Akra-Deen Bosom page. Let me put that link in the chat room right quick. And also, so on the Akra-Deen Bosom page, we go into detail about the different Abosom divinities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week. We have an article on each one of them. There are actually 11. And then we have a video that examines the article on each one of them. So just like there are 11 articles for the deity Awusi, Adwa, Benna, Abena, Awuku, Akua, Yao, Ya, Aba, Afi, and Amen. Those 11 divinities that govern the 7-day week, celestial bodies that govern the 7-day week. We have 11 articles, one on each one of them. Then we have 11 videos where we examine the articles that we wrote and give additional information as well. All of that is on the Akra-Deen Bosom page. But what you also want to check out for details dealing with the Okrawa, the soul, the divine consciousness, that force in nature, that deity that dwells within your head region, which is your own personal divinity. We go into detail about that in our book, The Okra Complex, The Soul of Akhanfo. And that, of course, is on the Nhoma page. Of course, the ebook version of that book, as well as all of our books, the ebook versions are free downloads. Of course, the soft cover versions we sell. So when you study that one, you'll learn about the specifics dealing with the nature of the Kra, called the Ori in the Yoruba tradition, the Seilido in the Vodou tradition, the Ka and Kaet, male and female in the tradition of ancient Kemet. It's called Chi in Igbo. So we're talking about, as a spirit, when you make your transition, for example, in Akhan, the spirit is called Sunsum. You're a Sunsum. You're a spirit that animates a Honam, a physical body. When you die, of course, your Honam, your physical body, is buried. Your spirit, your Sunsum, separates from the physical body. If you do what you need to do, you'll go into the ancestral realm after a period of dealing with your family members during the funerary process and all of that. Then you will make your trek to the ancestral realm, Asamando, to live with the Nananom and Samanfo and so forth. And you will live with your great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers, people who passed on before you. You live in that community, very similar to the dream state when you communicate with discarnate spirits in the dream state. Your body is laying in a dark space. There's no light, no sound, but you're communicating and having interaction. Same thing in the after-death state. The body is laying in a dark space, before it's buried, but your spirit is totally detached, and you're having interactions with other discarnate spirits as well. Sunsum, you're one of the Unsamafu now. You're living as a spirit in the ancestral realm. After a number of generations, it's time for you to return to the world. Your great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter is grown up, is about to, is gotten married, is about to copulate with her husband. It's time for you to return to the world. So before you are sent into the womb, you go before Nyame wa Nyame, the great mother and great father. You are assigned a divinity, a Kra, a soul, a divine consciousness, to dwell with you throughout your life. That force in nature takes up residence in your head region. You experience that force throughout your life as a strong pull in your head region to do this, to do that, stay away from this, don't do this, don't do that. When you engage in ritual practice, it will be more than just an inclination or a first mind. You'll be able to see that deity, communicate with that deity come to you in dreams and so forth. Sometimes, manifest where you can actually see that divinity. That's a force that dwells in your head region. So once that force attaches itself to your spiritual head region, now you are a Sunsum, a spirit, and you have a Kra, a soul, a divine consciousness. Now you're a full entity. Now you can be sent into the womb to await reincarnation. And then once you get into the womb, you're born 40 weeks later and you're born into the world. But you're a Sunsum, and attached to your Sunsum, your spirit body in the head region, is the Okra. And that's a deity that sits in your head region and guides you throughout your life. That's your Kra, your Okrawa, the female. Okra is male. Ka and Kaet. But the key is when Inyame sends that divinity to go and install itself in your head region, Inyame directs one of the Kradim Bosom to basically carry that divinity to you. So say if it's Adjua, Offset, that mothering divinity, she guides that little Kra, that little deity to you, and that deity comes through her. So it's colored by her energy, and it becomes a cool moon-type, energy-type Kra, and that's the Kra's mother, basically. That Kra comes through Offset and gets to you. Offset implants or installs that Kra in your head region, so that Kra is an Offset kind of Kra. It's a child of Offset, so it resonates at the frequency of Offset or Adjua, so your Kra's name is Adjua. Or like my Kra's name is Kwesi because it's a child of Awusi. Or somebody's born on Benada, the deity Benna, who's called Herubehudet or Bedat in ancient Kemet. He's called Ogun in the Yoruba tradition, Ogu in Vodou. He's called Benna in Akhan. He's also called Ogufo. Ogu means to cast metal in Akhan. Ogufo are the people folk who cast metal. Benna is the Abosom of war, but also of hot metal. So he's Ogufo, one of the Ogu people. It's the exact same term in Akhan. In Yoruba, of course, Ogun is the deity of war, but also of metal. We know that. So that's because our languages are related. We're the same. We're all related across the continent, so that you'll find that the descriptive titles of the deities will be the same when you look deeply into the languages. So, Benna, Herubehudet, Ogun, Ogu, and so forth. He's called Benna. If your soul was sent by Inyame to dwell in your head region, but it was given to Nana Benna first, it was colored by the energy of Nana Benna, so that little soul of yours, he is a child of Benna. So he carries Benna's energy, so he is called Kwa Benna. That soul is called Kwa Benna because he dwells on your head region. Then you can be called Kwa Benna as well, because you're a spirit that's governed by that deity Kwa Benna, that little soul divinity Kwa Benna. Your soul's name, your Kradim, is Kwa Benna, but you can also be called Kwa Benna. But you also have your own name as well. So people can call you Kwa Benna because they're like, well, he's a servant of Benna. His soul is a servant of Benna, so we can call him Kwa Benna as well. But you also have your other names. Just like I'm Kwesi, but that's my soul's name is Kwesi. The divinity that dwells in my head region, his name is Kwesi. So when I communicate with him, I say, Nana Kwesi me pawacha, chedi mi no kwade. Nana Kwesi, please show me what is true, what is accurate and so forth. I'm communicating with that force that's dwelling in my head region. His name is Kwesi, but since he dwells in my head region, he is my Kradim Bosom. People can call me Kwesi as well. But my name is Ra-Nehem Ptah Akhan. My soul's name is Kwesi. And Odwirafo is a title based on the function that I execute. So it's the same across the board. So your soul is a divinity. It comes through one of those 11 Abosom, and it's colored by the energy of one of those 11. So therefore, it takes on that quality, and that's how it goes. You read the Okra complex, the soul of Akhanfo. We go into detail. That whole book is about the Okra and the Okrawa in detail. So we get into that information. All right. So the second piece in the UBEN-HYENG, it basically builds on the piece we just talked about. We talked about the nature of the deities, which was the key piece for tonight, and their sounds that emanate from the deities, which generate their actual names. And then we also talked about how those names are manifest in the form of the Medutu, based on their movement and creation and the shape that life force energy takes when it operates and it takes on those forms and so forth. So the forms of the Medutu are not arbitrary either. But then, since we talked about the names of the deities, we can also touch on our names as well. And it comes from this, it's the same principle. Just like the deities generate their names, we are spirits animating through physical bodies, and the same process occurs. So this is what this talks about. And it starts here. It says, energy fathers movement. This is the beginning of creation. Energy before movement contained all vibrations necessary for the coming into being of all things in a passive potency. Goddess mother's energy. When we say energy fathers movement, we're talking about Nun and Nunet, of course, fathering Ra and Ra-RAIT. This is the beginning of creation. We're talking about the created universe, the beginning of the creator and creatress, not the supreme being. Nun and Nunet give birth to the creator and creatress who then go out and create. So that's why we say energy fathers movement. We're talking about this is the beginning of creation, the created universe, not the primordial Amen, Amenet, Khan, Kayet, Hehu, and Hehu, Nun and Nunet. Then Ra and Ra-RAIT begin the creator and creatress, the creative power, and so forth. So then we say sound is truly primordial. We receive sound, we process sound, we reproduce sound. Goddess sustains our form specifies sound. These sounds are our names. Again, we talked about based on your specific form that generates a certain collection of vibrations. That's why we said our form specifies sound. And Goddess sustains our form. So we're talking about Ren and Neet, as well as Setchima, the various divinities, female divinities. All movement vibrations produce sound, whether it's a string, whether it's a rope, whatever it is, movement generates sounds. All movement vibrations produce sound. Yet, the product, sound, is merely an audible manifestation, revelation of energy, pre-existent energy. Is the word you speak not already known to you before you allow it to pass from your lips? Did the word not exist prior to your speaking it? Is the spoken word then not a manifestation, revelation of energy, vibrations, which were pre-existent in your mind, spirit? Sound is truly primordial. As spirit vibrates through any form, sounds are emitted. We notice the different sounds produced as air vibrates through musical instruments of various shapes. Every musical instrument speaks. Its specific dialect is determined by its form, its use. This is language. Can we not perceive different sound groupings as spirit vibrates through humans of various spirit energetic configurations? Talking about Akwamu humans only now. Does your configuration not emit your true name? Do you not have a language, a primordial language, a language rooted in the product of energy vibrating through your genetic form? What then is your dialect? Does the region in which you live not have an effect on your physiology? Should then your natural dialect of the primal language not be a result of your migration to a different region? You have a name, you have a language. Goddess has written the dialect into your very nature. So when we're talking about stopping right here, you have a specific form. We talked about just like musical instruments, they have different forms, even though the same breath coming from the same set of lungs is the same, but because it's moving through a different form, then the collection of sound vibrations is different based on the form, and that determines the language of that instrument. That's its own dialect. The same life force energy, but because the sounds come out differently, the dialect is different. The musical instrument is speaking, but it speaks a different dialect than the other musical instrument because it has a different form. We have different forms as Aakhuamuman people. When the life force energy of Ra and Ra-RAIT moves throughout specific forms, it generates our true names. That collection of vibrations that are unique to your form, that's your actual name when replicated by your vocal cord. That's your name. Now, when we talked about that, different people of different spirit energy configurations and so forth, you have a language, a primordial language, a language rooted in the product of energy vibrating through your genetic form. What then is your dialect? Does the region in which you live not have an effect on your physiology? So even if you look at cold regions and hot regions, In hotter regions, people speak a little bit slower. The energy is hot. They don't move as fast. They don't want to overheat. So people move a little bit slower. They speak a little bit slower. They have a quote-unquote southern drawl and so forth. In hotter or cooler areas, colder areas, where people move a little bit quicker to continue to generate enough heat and so forth. That's the fundamental basis for that. They speak faster, speak more, biting and so forth. People from New York or something like that, it's not just a personality. It's talking about the effects that the energy of a certain region has on the way you move, the way you act, and the way you speak. We're talking about the energy of the Earth Mother in different regions affects the way we operate, affects the way we speak, affects our physiology, affects the way we interact with the world. And it also includes the way we enunciate, the way we speak our vowels, the vibrations that emanate from us. Is affected by the energy of the Earth Mother in the region that we are. So therefore, this is why it says, do you not have a language that's based on your specific form, the energy emanating from you and the way you speak? And that includes the people in your clan, your collective. You all are connected. You all have the same DNA, the same form, fundamentally as a collective, because you're all related. So the life force energy moving through your collective generates the way you speak and the way you operate. That's your language, a primordial language. A language rooted in the product of energy vibrating through your genetic form. But then there's a dialect, because you move to a different region, you're affected by the region. People move to a mountainous region, they take on the energy of that region. We talked about this before when the Abosom of that mountainous region that they never communicated with before possesses somebody or more than one person in that area, and it transforms the body of the person, including the sperm and ovum of the person. And when they have children, the sperm and ovum of those children that creates that child resonates at the frequency of the deity of the mountain that they just came in contact with, and now that deity possesses the children. That child is the first born in that region that is indigenous to the region. You become indigenous not just because you move to a place and you're the first one there. You move to a place and you get possessed by the abosom that governs the region, and that affects the sperm and ovum and the cells of the people. So when they have children, the children's bodies literally resonate at the frequency of the deity of that region. And now they are the firstborn who are indigenous to the region. They're literally tied to the earth in that region. That's how you become indigenous, and that's why only Afro-Kaini people can be indigenous anywhere in the world, because we're the only ones who can communicate and be possessed by the Abosom. So when those deities possess, or you move to a riverine area or a place by the ocean or a very hot area or cool area, the forces in nature, local divinities of those areas, you incorporate into the family literally through possession, through ritual practice, ritual communication, possession and so forth, affects and changes the cells of the people, changes the movement and energy of the people slightly. Our ritual expressions change because of that infusion of energy. So the way we speak is slightly changed. The dialect we speak is slightly changed based on the forces in nature that animate the region and have gotten into our clan. So our expressions change, our modes of dress change, our dances change a little bit, the dialect changes a little bit based on the movement of the Abosom of the region. And therefore, we have a new dialect now. Even the foods we eat, whether it's plant life, mineral life, the game, the animal life, who are already indigenized to the land as well. We take that in when we consume our foods. It affects our cells and everything. That includes the sperm and ovum cells. And when we give birth to children, these are children with different kinds of cells, slightly different, radiating or resonating at a different frequency than they were before we moved to that region. So they have a different structure. It's the same fundamentally, but slightly different. And that accounts for the slight differences in dialectical variation. That's the real reason. Try to track, shifts in vowels and shifts in consonants and thinking they're being linguists and nonsense like that. They have no knowledge whatsoever about what's really going on. So somebody can sit down and become a PhD and with their concentration in linguistics and have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of what accounts for the shifts in vowels and the shifts in the way consonants are pronounced in the different dialects. They'll just say, well, over time, it was a shift, and they pronounce it like this now, and that's just the way. They have no knowledge at all, period. It deals with the forces in nature that we've been dealing with for thousands of years. Our ancestral religion is what animates our culture. Our culture is a reflection of the divine order in creation. When we attune to the forces in nature that govern creation, we replicate that order that we have attuned with by connecting with them in our social order, and that's a civilization. When we build civilizations, the White Narrow Spring builds societies. A civilization is a social order rooted in the divine order in nature. So only Aakhuamuman people can build civilizations, because we're the only ones who can attune to the forces in nature that actually are the embodiments of order in creation, and we can replicate that order in our societies, and therefore we have a civilized society or civilization. So this is where we get our cultural expressions from, and the slight differences not only in expressions but also in language. Even when we eat the foods and the mineral life and plant life and game in certain areas, different proteins and so forth, you have people who are short or something like that, type people, they move into a certain region, eating plants, protein-rich plants and everything, and now all of a sudden they're growing taller. They get possessed by certain divinities, energy shifts, their bodies changes to a certain degree. Now they have a different structure, and that also affects the way they speak. So when you look at dialectical differences and proto-languages and so forth on the continent, and you see Twa-type people or quote-unquote so-called pygmy dwarf-type people, Twa-type people on one hand, and you see the very tall, like Dinka people, like Nilotic people who are very tall, very slender and so forth. Then you have people who are kind of in between, like what they would call Bantu-speaking people, Kwa language-speaking people like Yoruba, Akhan, Ebe, and Bakongo, and the vast majority of the people on the continent. Then you have the people in the north, the Berber-type people, prior to the White Narrow Spring invading. So you have these 4 different major groups. You'll find that the proto-languages associated with these major groups are the major language families in reality, and there's a reason for that. Their forms are related to their dialect. And then, of course, there are expressions of their dialects as well. Some of our people are trying to reconstruct languages, and they're going by the European model. They have no knowledge of what they're talking about. So at best, they're stabbing in the dark. Okay, so that's where we talk about the primordial language. Do you have a language? Do you not have a language? A primordial language, a language rooted in the product of energy vibrating through your genetic form. What then is your dialect? Does the region in which you live not have an effect on your physiology? Should then your natural dialect of the primal language not be a result of your migration to a different region? You have a name. You have a language. Goddess has written the dialect into your very nature. The ancestral spirits recognize the dialect of the primordial language they spoke. They recognize it when you call their name in their dialect during libation. They recognize it when you provoke dialogue in their dialect through evocation. Their dialect nourishes them, for it is descendant through Aakhuamuman from the primordial God language, which is a tonal language. Tonal languages give different meanings for the same word based on the way in which the word is pronounced and what tone it is spoken. Different tones are different vibrations. Different vibrations yield different meaning. Is this not of God? We're talking about Tahuti now. Are the different phases of creative power not reflective of different rates of vibration, thus yielding different tones, values, meanings, deity? Aakhuamuman language resounds divinity. When we talk about different tonal languages, Akhan is a tonal language. So, for example, if you say pa with the low to high sound, that means father. When you say pa high to low, that means good. When you say pa, that means to pet. If you say oba, that means female, woman. If you say oba, low to high, that means he open. If you say opa, that means child or offspring. So oba Oba, Oba. Those are three different ways: high, low, low, high, and Oba, just a high sound. Three different meanings. The different tones yield different meanings. Different tones are different rates of vibration. Different rates of vibration yield different values, different personalities, different meanings. This is, again, going back to the difference in movement of the divinities, generating different sounds and so forth. That's why we say Afurakani, Afuraikaidi language resounds divinity. There's not a notion of we have a few words in our language that are mantras, words of power, and you use those few little magical words and you can make things happen. That's Hindu nonsense. And when they talk about Heka, the divinity, Heka, and calling him a magic and a divinity, a magician and so forth, and saying Heka are just the words of power, and they're just mantras, that's not accurate. Afurakani, Afuraikaidi language, all of the words in Afurakani, Afuraikaidi languages have mantric value. It's not just one or two. Our languages are tonal, so when we speak our languages, you see the rising and falling of tones. It sounds like a melody when people are speaking. Sound vibrations rising and falling, expanding and contracting. So we're talking about an entire language that has mantric value, not just a few words. All right, so you are connected genetically to the ancestral spirit. If the dialect they spoke nourishes and energizes them, should it not nourish and energize you as their descendant, their incarnation? You have a right and responsibility to employ the dialect that was written in you, the name resonating as you. Goddess has a name, God has a language. Speak them if you are of God as God. Proper name and language are energetic links to spirit. So again, that goddess is really neat, the divinity that governs names. We're talking about language, talking about, and the God dealing with language, talking about Tuhuti, of course, and also dealing with Heka, the divinity Heka. When we talk about the ancestral spirit, because the language itself is a reflection of their spiritual makeup and our spiritual makeup, when they hear their primal language, primordial language, when you speak it through libation, ritual evocation, it nourishes them. The sound vibrations that emanate from that dialect that they used to speak, it resonates with their actual form, it nourishes them. It also nourishes us. They don't speak English. Our ancestors and ancestors don't listen to English. You don't pour libation in English or pray in English. They're not listening to that. The Abosom are not listening to that. When you engage in that, what you're doing is projecting perverse language to the ancestors and ancestors, which they don't embrace anyway. In the basic sense, it's no different than if a baby is trying to speak and they don't know how to speak and they're just saying all different kinds of sounds. You're not listening necessarily to the different sounds that they're making. You're listening to the intent and the intensity of the sounds. If the way they're crying determines whether or not they're wet or if they're hungry or if they're in pain, you're listening to the intensity. They're trying to speak English words, but they don't get them right yet. You know what they're trying to do, what they want when they're pointing and doing this, and that. You're not listening to the garbled words that they're trying to put together. You know what they want. You're tuning to their intent. When we try to speak and pour libation in English and pray in English and all that, the ancestors and ancestors are not listening to the language of the whites and their offspring at all. What you're doing is projecting a set of perverse vibrations. Some of our Nsamafo who heard those perverse vibrations when they were being robbed and tortured by the whites and their offspring, they don't want to hear that English nonsense. What they do is attune to your intent, and they reject the pseudo-English nonsense and attune to your spirit. So we use the language. If you want to communicate with your Nsamafo, you can begin with the language of ancient Kemet if you don't know what group you came from, because that's the proto-language of the various languages on the continent spoken today. It's the mother language, mother and father language of the various languages spoken all over the continent, and wherever black people are in the world today, it goes back to that language going back over 42,000 years. So you can begin to learn that language, and your Nsamafo from ancient Kemet will direct you to what group you come from. So that's key. So And so we went through that piece, and this is why, as you are connected to genetically to the ancestral spirits, if that language nourishes them, the sound vibrations and that specific dialect, the way they generate those sound vibrations connected to their form, and you're descendant from them, incarnated through them, it's going to stimulate your form and your spirit as well. So when we hear ancestral languages, we're stimulated by that. And it helps to realign our sunsum, our spirits, with our crowd just by speaking the language. And then, of course, speaking the name. So that's the basis of that particular text, that particular piece. Okay, and we 10 minutes left in the live stream. We'll probably go a couple of minutes in overtime as we go through this final document. We touched on a lot of it anyway in these other two documents, but we're going to go through this final document, SANKOFA Wodin, return, go, and grass, and take your name. But if you want to listen after 11 o'clock, past 11 o'clock, you have 8.5 minutes to call in, because the people on the phone will be able to continue to hear past 11 o'clock, but on the computer, on the net, it will be off at 11 o'clock. So the call-in number is 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. You have 8 minutes to call in. All right. So the last piece is the link that we posted, SANKOFA Wodin. It's an article we published talking about returning, going, and taking your ancestral name. Already we've talked about the nature of the name, how our names are actually written into our spirit, of course encoded within our kra, and written into our very sunsum, our spirit. And as we move and function, the specific collection of vibrations emanating from us is our actual name. And when we speak that, it actually stimulates us. When we hear it, that collection of vibrations, and we speak it, and even think it, we make our sunsum align with our kra, align with the function we are to execute in the world that's encoded within our kra, our soul, our divine consciousness. So we touched on the foundation of that cosmological principle in these last two pieces. So this text just goes into detail about related specifically to the name. So we can touch on different aspects of that. And before we get into that, so we're just going to say, because some people will have to, log off at 11, can't stay on beyond that particular time, have in the next 6 minutes or whatever. So we'll be back on tomorrow, of course, for Egua Marketplace. We'll send out a notification for that. So before we get into this last document, we just want to say, for those who have to check out in the next few minutes, please support, if you value the work that we're doing, please support the soft cover versions of our publications. We have 13 out dealing with the information we're talking about today and various other things. Of course, Afraka, the origin of the term Africa, Mada Nechi, divine law and divine hate, KUKUU-TUNTUM, the ancestral jurisdiction, dealing with the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, Talmud, plus cosmology, cosmological foundation of creation, and so forth. UBEN-HYENG, the ancestral summons, which we've been reading from tonight, dealing with various aspects of ritual practice and their functionality. We dealt with two pieces in UBEN-HYENG. There are actually 20 of them. Dealing with libation, shrines, ancestral and deity communication, and ancestral and deity possession. We dealt with idols yesterday, nature worship, all kinds of things, ritual calendar, and just a number of different things, all the ritual practices, sacrifice, and all these different things that we deal with. The UBEN-HYENG goes into detail about that, so that's another book. The Okra Complex, The Soul of Akhan, which we mentioned, that's one of our soft-cover books. Obedima, Afurakani Manhood, which is very popular. Akwamu, Our Whole Life Journal, where we talk about natural health and melanin and culture and trustery in an introductory fashion. We also have Anidaho, Awareness, the origin of the term God. We mentioned that, but it also has to do with the terms Nega and Naga and Nganga Ur, and showing what these actual terms actually mean, the cosmology dealing with the origin of, Ganga Ur and Ganga Uri, titles of Amen and Amenet, and also showing that these names have nothing to do with the word nigger. And we actually go into the etymological origin of the term nigger, Negro, Necro, and so forth, showing that it actually comes from Kemet. It means foes or enemies who are crushed and beaten to death. So it's a derogatory term. It's always been that. We also have the book Moor Means Dead, where we show the etymological and cosmological origin of the term Moor, which means dead. So when you identify yourself as a Moor, you're actually calling yourself a mentally dead, spiritually dead individual. It's a derogatory term. That's why the whites in our spring labeled our people that after they learned the term from our people, it's a derogatory term, meaning slave, vassal, socially dead, or spiritually dead. And they applied that just to our people across the board. And some Negroes now are running around calling themselves Moors, talking about that's our original title, which is idiotic. So we go into detail about that and expose that fully, which nobody had done until we published that. Kokobo, warning, we show that dissexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet. So we have a number of articles that deal with that, showing that the whites in our spring are trying to misinform our people once again, as always, in which they will always do until they become extinct. They will always try to force the perversity of their culture on our culture, trying to say that we embrace homosexuality in ancient Kemet, which is totally inaccurate. They pull out a few texts and try to say this is proof of that. We show those texts and prove that it's not proof of it. We prove that we never accepted the sexuality in ancient Kemet. That's one of our texts, of course. We also have the origin of the term yoga, kara, kasa, the origin and nature of the chakra. And we added some more information just the other day dealing with the heart and what is often called Tai Chi and Qigong. We show in the Medutu those various forms that they stole from and tried to manufacture another practice. So that's the book, NYANKOPON-NYANKONTON, RA-RAIT, the book on that. Odumankaman, Trejuampong, which is Atem and Kepra. We have a book on that as well. So those are the 13 books that we have in softcover. Please support those. You can go to the website, the Homa page on Odwirafo.com, ODWIRA, F as in free, O.com. You can go there now and make those, support our work so we can continue to give free services, publications, broadcasts, presentations in different cities for free to our people. So we appreciate your support in that effort. It also helps us continue to, have free classes and everything else. All right, so we're going to get into this document, SANKOFA Wodin. We put the link. Let me put the link again in the chat room for those who came in a little bit later. We'll post it in here, and you can download it directly. And some of the information the basis of it we went through in the last two pieces, so this is just tied into the name itself. So we say the Akhan term for name is Din. So the Din is analogous to water in Afuraka with respect to its value to our well-being, our proper development, and proper functioning within creation. So as an Afuraka, the individual, you are a created entity in creation. In order to live and to function properly, your physical body is absolutely dependent on water, yet you need more than just water to survive. Analogically, as a created entity, your sunsum, your spirit, must have a properly given or received din, a name, in order to be properly distinguished from other asunsum, or spirits, to live and to execute your unkravia, your divine function, given to you by Inyamewa, Inyame, the Supreme Being, to execute in creation. Yet your sunsum requires more than a properly given or received name or name in order to function harmoniously in life. It is critical that we understand the totality of this truth. Your body absolutely needs the replenishing properties of water. That's number one. Yet water is not all that your body needs. Your sunsum, your spirit, absolutely needs the replenishing energy of a proper or true din, a din or name. Yet, a proper true din or name is not all that your sunsum needs. Both aspects of this truth are equally important. You absolutely need water or you will die. But you also at the same time need more than just water. You absolutely need a properly given edin or name, but you also need more than that to function harmoniously. You need to understand both of those things. That's critical, and this article goes into detail about why that's critical. And we, of course, and we just went over, it says the deen manifests as a collection of vibrations and sound waves. We just talked about that in pretty good detail. Vibrations carry energy. Energy affects consciousness, thoughts, ideas, behavior, physiological processes. In order to execute your Nkravia, your divinely allotted function or life focus, your Sunsum must constantly and consistently receive and transmit energy or vibrations that are in harmony with your Akra, as opposed to constantly and consistently receiving and transmitting energy or vibrations that are in disharmony with your Akra. This is similar to ensuring that you accept clean water into your body consistently, as opposed to accepting contaminated water into your body consistently. And we talked about, vibrations affecting the world around us. People can sing, sound vibrations will break a glass. You can hear sound vibrations from a car and the windows shake. You can feel the beating in your chest and so forth. Sound vibrations, if they can break a glass or move, affect your heartbeat, they can affect your organs, your cells and so forth. That's energy, that's power, that's movement. They also affect your consciousness, affect your spirit. Those same vibrations affect your organs, cells, and so forth. So when we talk about the various wavelengths and rates of vibration, which constitute the different created sounds manifest in nature, are categorized within nature under the governance of different Abosom. All created entities are affected by the various sound wave groupings manifest in nature according to our particular connection to the Abosom. Your particular connection to the Abosom is unique. It is determined by the specific ancestral blood circle of which you are a component, incarnate part. So that just is talking about what we were talking about earlier, our descent, our incarnation to a specific clan governed by a certain Abosom. They carry a certain energy configuration, the sound vibrations that they generate as they move. That also moves through us. If we're a child of a certain divinity, a cool divinity, have that cool kind of energy, and as we move, we generate that kind of energy. When we have a name associated with us, when somebody projects a name towards us, and we receive that collection of sound vibrations and process it as something that identifies us and incorporate that and we respond, that's no different than drinking some water. We receive sound vibrations, we're receiving energy. If we attempt to incorporate that within us and those sound vibrations are a disordered collection of vibrations, we're constantly pulling in disordered vibrations and are identifying ourselves with a disordered vibration. Then we announce some English name that we call ourselves and identify ourselves that way. We're trying to attune to a set of disordered vibrations. It's not just a name. A name is a collection of sound vibrations. Sound vibrations are a collection of energy. We know energy can break a glass and can do different things, affect ourselves. If you have disordered energy, it creates disorder within your body, within your spirit. If you identify with disordered collections of vibrations, that means you're trying to ingest a collection of disordered energy, no different than trying to ingest some dirty water. And that affects the way we think. And, of course, that affects the way we process information, our intentions, and then our actions. So this article goes into detail about that and talks about, the various excuses that people use for holding on to English names, like talking about, well, out of respect for my mother, I'm going to continue to use the name. You're actually disrespecting your mother and your mother's mother and your great-grandmother and people who were raped and had the name raped into our family. You're not respecting your people by ingesting poison. If the whites and offspring sold crack and injected crack into the veins of your mother and then she passing on to you and somebody else. And they said, okay, well, now it's your turn. You want some crack? And you say, no. And they say, well, you're disrespecting your mother and your grandmother because they smoke crack that they got from the whites and their offspring. You're like, well, yeah, I don't want to disrespect my mother. I'm going to do the crack as well. That's insane. So to say that you're respecting your family members by holding on to the quote-unquote family name, all you're doing is upholding the whites and their offspring. Even the deceased cracker who forced that name on your family, he's laughing and shaking his head because you're still worshiping him by holding on to that perverse name. So we talk about the name Din, Rin in ancient Kemet, Rin, called Edin in Akhan. Key is, it says, the greatest significance of the Din is that it is an actual spiritual entity that takes up residence within the individual. This is shown in Kemet with the Ntorotu, or the goddess, and Ntorou, the god, the deity, who govern the name, the Rin, are called Rininet and Rinin, female and male. In the pictorials, they are found in close proximity to the Ntorou of destiny called Shai. The Ntorotu of destiny, deity of destiny, or fate is called Shayet, or Shait. Thus, in the symbolism of ancient Khanid and Kemet, as well as the culture of the Akhan, the Din is directly tied to the function, the Shai, the Shait, and so forth. So there are male and female forces that hold the name. When we say goddess holds your name, we're talking about Rininit, and the males Rinin, forces that hold the name, a spiritual force, a matrix that holds the collection of sound vibrations that when you speak it, it's a unit of power that's explosive that can, align your spirit with your crowd. So we mentioned them. And there's only a few other things in here that we really need. We talk about the origin of the term SANKOFA and a number of different things here. We talk about Subai and Pa, good character, Subai and Bani, evil character, the relationship between the name and aligning yourself with good character and evil character. Most of that information is straightforward in the article. We want to get down to, there's a specific section we want to touch on. Okay. So, and you can read through that information. There was a specific experience, and we related the experience in the text, just to give some context for the way the Nsamanfo communicate with us and so forth. It's just an example, and this is the part that's in italics at the end of the text. So it says, I know a woman who became interested in returning to her own ancestral culture. While she understood the value of black people embracing their true history and culture and the value of some form of Pan-Africanism, she really had never been involved in any form of Afurikani ancestral religion. The strong urge towards reconnecting to her culture, she found out, was an ancestral urge. We talked at length about those urges. I suggested that she seek guidance from her ancestresses and ancestors, or it is they who moved her in this direction. Eventually, she began to go to them. One day, she told me that she had a dream that one of her relatives told her specifically that she and her family are Akhan. She didn't know much about Akhan people or culture, but she was glad to finally regain her identity. Her dream was confirmed for me, for on a number of occasions, she would come to me giving me names, titles, and their definitions that the Nsamanfo had told her to give and share with me. She never studied the Tree language or any other Afurikani language for that matter, yet she was giving me names and titles that were actually Tree words, names that meant exactly what her Nsamanfo had told her they meant. When I shared with her and showed her in print that the names, titles, and their definitions that were given to her were specifically Akhan names, titles, and definitions, she was gratified to know that it really was Nsamanfo, her ancestresses and ancestors, communicating with her in her own ancestral language. Once again, she came to me and shared a dream where her Nsamafo showed her a group of animals that are connected to her spiritually. The dream was very interesting to me for two reasons. Number one, the group of animals that she was shown are actually the animal totems for one of the Akhan matrilineal clans, or the Abusia matrilineal clan, that I happen to be from. I am therefore very familiar with these Achineboa animal totems, for they are sacred to our Abusia ancestral clan. Number two, I had just been on the internet not even an hour before she shared the dream with me, looking at a website which had pictures and descriptions of these very Achineboa animal totems. I was looking up information about my Abusia clan that day. When she told me of her dream, I asked her to wait a second. I went to print out the information from the website that I had just been reading earlier. I came back and handed her pictures and descriptions of the same Achineboa animal totems and the name of the Abusia clan that she just described to me from her dream. When she saw the pictures and the descriptions, she was very gratified to know that not only were her Nsamafo communicating with her via dreams, but they gave her a group of animals that are sacred only to that particular group of Akhan people. No other group in Afuraka have the same grouping of animals as their family Achineboa besides this particular Akhan group. During this process, her Nananome Nsamafo also showed her what one of her Adin or names should be. So we shared that information in the article just to show that somebody who wasn't studying ancestral religion or culture or language, their Nsamafo told them that they're Akhan. Specifically, they didn't know anything about the Akhan people. They, wanted to learn something about that. They were giving her specific names and titles and giving them definitions of what these names and titles meant. Then she found out later that these actual names and titles were Akhan names and Akhan titles, and they had the exact same definitions that her ancestral spirits gave her, and she never studied the Akhan language. That was confirmed for her. Later on, she had a dream about specific grouping of animals, told that these were connected to her spiritually. It turned out that that specific grouping is a grouping of animals associated specifically with an Akhan matrilineal clan or matriclan. So the Nsamafo again was showing her not only they showed her what her name is, they showed her what ethnic group she comes from and what specific matriclan she comes from, and she didn't know anything about the culture or the language or anything like that. So the Nsamafo communicating, this somebody right here, of course, in the United States. So the Nsamafo never stopped communicating with us. They still communicate. It had nothing to do with us crossing Epo Abena, Abosom, the ocean, the great divinities of the ocean and so forth. We are Afurakani people. They communicate with us wherever we are. Same is true of the Abosom. So that's just, some proof of that. So we're going to stop in right here. I say for everybody tuning in, tune back in tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern for Egua Marketplace. And again, we thank you for, supporting our work. Please go to our Nhoma page once again, the publications page, and support our soft cover publications. This is the way that we cover our expenses for Blog Talk, cover our expenses for our websites, cover our expenses so that we can give away the free ebooks of all of our publications, do the free presentations in different cities, as well as provide our free services to the Afurakani community, including the substance abuse abstinence ritual practice where we help individuals help themselves to get off of smoking weed and smoking cigarettes and drinking and everything else. We have within our culture a means by which we can overcome these things without having to leave our culture. The same with people overcoming domestic violence, domestic abuse. We also have a program whereby people want to become distributors. They're unemployed. They come to us. They want to become distributors and sell our books. All they have to do is, we have a process on the Nhoma page, and any of our people can do this. You basically get the books for 30% off, and then you sell them, of course, for full price So if you of course, a $10 book, you would purchase it from us for $7, and then you would sell it for $10, and you would make $3 every time you sold a book. When people see the soft cover books in color with the vivid images from ancient combatants and so forth, they're very intrigued, as well as the subject matter, like Jesus not existing and Moses not existing and Muhammad and Bilal not existing. When they see that on the front cover, they're intrigued. When they see it's only $9 or $8 or $10, and they see you holding it, they'll say, where did you get that from? You can say, hey, you can buy one from me. I have some right here. You can generate funds for yourself, employ yourself, or generate additional income for yourself while nourishing our people at the same time in a positive fashion. So we have that program so we can do something for our people who have been locked out of employment or want to engage in entrepreneurship, dealing with nation building and so forth. So please support our work by, and support these endeavors by supporting our work. And the way we do that, even though all of the videos and articles and books are free online, the way we, support what we're doing is through the sale of our softcover publications. So please go to the Nhoma page, publications page on our website, and support that. And remember, for those who came in later, we do have the 30% off discount for those who purchase any of the 10 books all at once, a 10-book set, or the entire 13-book set is 30% off. And everybody who's received 13-book set is very appreciative of the quality and the content of the information. So, yet I say again, we appreciate you for tuning in and sharing the information. And, of course, share this information, the links with your contacts. And we will be back on tomorrow at Gua Marketplace at 9 p.m. Eastern. Yet I say, and we will meet again. Yebeshia.